Hey everybody, I'm David Henry from LearnStageLighting.com, and in this video I want to show you how to use LED pixel tape on your stage. Now, if you've been paying attention over the last few years, a lot of folks, especially in churches and bands, have started using LED tape on their stages. Much like I have behind me here, LED tape allows you to create some really cool custom looks and designs on your stage and then be able to control it just like any other DMX light. Now, pixel tape takes that a step further, and honestly, it's a little easier to work with once you understand the basic concepts. So grab your coffee, because in this video, I'm going to walk you through everything that you need to know start from finish, and then at the end, I'm going to show you where you can get more resources, more help, and more in-depth guides to applying this to your particular circumstance. Coffeeed up and ready to go. The very first thing that you need to do is get some supplies together. First and foremost, you're going to need some LEDs. You can use any LED pixel tape, generally with most LED pixel tape drivers, but you probably want to buy something decent. I really like Entek stuff, and I work with them, and they recently sent me this new stuff, which is their new black 60 pixels per meter 12 volt tape. Now, you might be asking yourself at this moment, 12 volt or 5 volt? You might notice if you look online that you can find 5 volt and 12 volt tape readily available. 12 volt tape tends to be a little more expensive than the 5 volt stuff, but I can tell you when you're installing it, it is going to make your life so much easier. Now, if your tape runs are really going to be short, then you might be able to get away with 5 volt. But for the vast majority of projects, I'm going to recommend going with a 12 volt tape, such as this new one from Entek. Plus, you've got the ability to control each LED now with this new tape that some manufacturers are able to do, some aren't, but this Entek one can do it in a really high quality way. Now, you don't have to buy Entek, and if it's your first project and you're just goofing around or trying it out, go and buy some cheaper tape to begin. You'll find as you want to work and do larger scale projects, maybe across your whole stage, if you want your colors to match up, if you want it to look really good and last for a long time, buy the good stuff, okay? So you need your tape. The next thing you're going to need is a pixel driver. What is this? Well, I've got one right here on the desk next to me, and I'm going to pull this off and show it to you. It's actually plugged in, running the lights behind me. And what this is Entek's Pixel Octo. This is just one example of a pixel driver, okay? And what a pixel driver does is it simply takes in networked DMX information, generally networked because with pixels we get a high channel count, more on that in a minute, and it turns it into pixel data, which some people call SPI or WS signal, or they might call it something else, serial data. There's a lot of names for it. And there's a couple things about this. So you just, when you're buying it, you need to know that you need a box like this, okay? This is, like I said, Entek's Pixel Octo. It can control 8 universes of pixels, which is a bunch. And I'll put the real number on the screen. And you're able to control that with the Octo. But let's talk a minute about channel counts. Now, if there's anywhere that a pixel project might come to a screeching halt, it's with the amount of DMX channels it's going to take. As I mentioned when I talked about the controller, you're going to be talking to most controllers via ArtNet or SACN, networked DMX. And the reason why is because each individual one of these pixels on this tape can be controlled independently. It's each 3 channels of data. And at 60 pixels per meter, that means every meter is 180 DMX channels. You can probably see how this adds up quick because a meter is only a little bit more than 3 feet, right? 180 DMX channels, you're quickly eating up full DMX universes. So if you don't have a lot of channels available, then you might want to go with 30 pixels per meter. Especially if the pixel's not real close to people, 30 pixels per meter will do just fine for your project. Now, if, for example, you really need the pixel density, then you're going to go with the 60. But if you really need, on the other end, to keep your channel count down, you might want to look at a device like Entek's PixelPort. I've got one actually on the wall over here mounted permanently, but I'll show a shot of it here. And the PixelPort offers a 17-channel DMX mode that's kind of an effects generator where you can dial in a background color, dial in a waveform on top of that, and have some really cool color effects going and be able to trigger it with just 17 channels from your lighting console. That one also takes network DMX, but there's ways to convert these things. So getting back on track to get you building a pixel tape design on your stage, we've got the bits together. We've got the pixel controller and the pixel tape. That's really the bare bones, besides having a lighting controller, as to what you need to control this stuff. Now, let's talk about that lighting controller for a minute, okay? If your lighting console supports pixel mapping, like a lot of them do, and more are adding it every day, then you're probably good to go, especially if you have enough parameters or channels unlocked to be able to control your pixels. If you don't, you might want to check out a media server, which is a specialized computer program that's built just to control pixels. One of my favorites is Entek's Elm, because not only is it affordable, it's really easy to use, and I've got a video on it here. So once you've got those three parts, a controller or media server, a pixel controller, and then the pixel tape itself, and there's other types of pixels out there, you next need to mount the pixel tape on something. Now, if you care about your pixel tape, please mount it to metal, okay? I've got a couple options here. The first, which is one that I really recommend to people, is this out-of-the-box trim channel, okay? This is something you get at the hardware store. It's built for trimming out like plywood. Like this is for 1/2-inch plywood. You pop it on the end, cleans up a piece of 1/2-inch plywood real nice, okay? But we can also cut this. I use a metal blade on either a hacksaw manually or a Sawzall. Those are two options there. And you can cut this to any length you need, and then we'll just lay the LED tape inside of it, okay? Now that's another reason actually to go with a quality brand. You don't have to go with Entek, but that's what I've got here. Because the adhesive on the back of these guys, with the cheaper brands, usually has an M on it, and it's not real 3M tape. This is, and this stuff will stick for real. It's the real deal. It's not going to mess with you to a lot of surfaces. You know, to something like a wood or a particle board, yeah, you know, an adhesive like this doesn't go well. But to a metal surface like this that's clean, it'll stick great. Another great option that you may have seen online is that you can buy these little pre-cut strips. They usually come in 1 meter segments. Entek will sell them to you. You can buy them on Amazon. And it's just an aluminum strip with space to lay your LED in. But what I really like about them is they have this diffuser you can put on top of them. So you can snap that in, get a diffused look, like I've got right here. This is actually a 60 pixel per meter tape. Got that diffused look on it. Looks great. It really just depends on what you're doing with the LEDs. And so that's what you really want to figure out next with your project is, you know, head over to somewhere like churchstagedesignIdeas.com. I love that site. Type in LED tape or pixels and look at some of the designs that are there. Some are just going to have the LEDs on a wall and they're just going to be bare. For example, you know, literally no extrusion at all. No, you know, just the aluminum behind them. Whoop. You know, no cover on them, just like this. Looks pretty cool. Okay, especially with a black tape like this. You may also want to put a diffusion in front of your lights. Or maybe you set up the pixels and you put a little more distance away, maybe some Coroplast, some corrugated plastic. You might also actually set it and have it up against a wall or a set piece shining up or down. I actually took a screenshot of my phone off one not too long ago that'll show here that uses some cool geometric room tiles, and these are just interior design pieces, and it shines the light on them from the pixels, and it looks really darn cool. The kind of downside to this is you don't get to really experience or understand the depth of the pixel. Okay, so you can't really see every individual pixel as clearly because you're not looking right at them. But regardless of what you're doing, it's time to plan it out. So you want to go ahead, think about the substrate, whatever it is that you're applying the pixels to. Think about the lengths you're going to want of that. One thing that I like to advise people to do is think in pretty standard lengths. Pixels, of course, are done in meters. That's the standard for the pixel industry. In America here, we like to think in feet a lot because that's where all our lumber is cut. And so I think about, hey, what if you made 2 foot? What if you made 3 foot segments, 4 foot? And then you go ahead and apply the pixels to that. And then you can put them on a set piece today in 4 foot strips one way. And then you might be able to put them in a set piece another day in strips another way, and reuse that same tape. A lot of people think about LED tape and they just buy the cheap stuff and they think, I'll just use this for design and I'll throw it away. And you can do that. But with a good quality tape, not only are you going to get better brightness and better ease of use setting it up, but it's also reusable if you build it into something that you can take down, keep, and set up in a different way later. So this isn't just a one-trick pony. First thing we're going to do is you're going to want to cut this stuff to length and solder it. So for cutting it, I'm just going to grab my good old wire cutters. I use these guys from Klein, pretty simple. We'll link to all the tools noted in the description. But these guys are great, and they've got a nice cutting blade here that I find works really well for LED tape. I've had these guys, oh gosh, at least 10 years, probably more. So I'm just going to take the tape, and I'm going to find how long it needs to be. I'll put the last pixel at the very end, and if your runs are going to be kind of long, you might want to find a friend. I'll go to this end. I will find where I want to cut it. Right there. And now I'm prepared to cut it. Now, you can cut the pixels pretty much anywhere you need to, okay? Anywhere you see these channels, these copper parts, you're good to go. Now, occasionally, actually just 2 away from where I'm planning to cut, there is a place where they're soldered together. And you get that from time to time every few meters. It's just a normal part of LED tape. So, got this here. I've got my cutters. And I just want to get right in the middle as best I can. I really want to get in the middle of that copper because that's going to be my solder point to connect to additional strips. So I want to cut in the middle so that I'm being fair to both sides. Okay? Now, if you're going to be attaching additional strips to this, then now's the time to solder. So I'm literally going to grab this guy. Sorry about those annoying metal sounds. And I'm going to solder it. So for this particular project, I'm just demonstrating here, so I'm not going to actually solder it. But what you want to do, just for a little example here, is grab your soldering iron. I just got a simple, this is an Elenco brand, really inexpensive iron. Let it heat up. And then once it's ready to go, get your pixels on a nice flat surface. And you just want to touch the copper. What I like to do, like any good soldering, is you want to heat up the copper that's on the strip first, okay? Then bring in the solder. Don't touch the soldering iron with the solder, but touch the copper on the LED strip. That way, it's going to flow and fill up the strip quite quickly, actually, once it's hot enough. The idea here is that you're not melting the solder with the iron, but you're heating up the copper strip with the soldering iron and then letting the solder flow to that strip. You don't get a good connection if you just heat the solder up with the iron and stick it on the strip. That doesn't work great, it's not reliable, and it's not a good connection. So solder nicely, and if you're not comfortable or haven't done this before, then find a friend who likes to solder and buy them some pizza or beer or something. Okay, so with that said, you're going to solder those on. This particular strip, like I mentioned, has 12 volt plus and minus, and then it has 2 data lines. One's a backup. A lot of strips just have 1 data line. You may also need, as you do this, you may also need a heat gun. If you use some heat shrink, shrink that on the end, good to go. Once you've done that and you've soldered on wire, and I really recommend using connectors in between different strips, whether that's a waterproof connector from somewhere like Amazon or a JST style connector. I've really grown to like the waterproof ones because they're just not as cheaply made. You solder that stuff on, Now it's time to apply it, okay? Go careful here. You want to be careful with this. You want to make sure you do a really good job so your end product looks great. Now, this is an advantage to a pre-made trim as opposed to an aluminum trim channel like this. This trim channel is cheaper, it's easy to find at the hardware store, and I really like it. But you need to take a little more diligence when you apply the tape to make sure it's in a really nice straight line. The pre-made LED strip Amazon 1 meter segments, special like these guys, are only really big enough to hold the tape, so it's not hard to apply it nice and straight. But especially if people are going to see it visually, it makes sense to apply it. So you want to pull the tape off the back, and what you can't see here that's kind of difficult to see is the adhesive is on the back of the strip, and then there's just the tape that protects the adhesive. Now, on cheaper strips, it's really easy to start pulling the adhesive off the tape itself. The bond to it isn't very good. So be really careful when you're pulling off that protective tape, especially when you're working with cheap stuff. Again, another reason to consider buying the nice stuff, because you can accidentally pull that adhesive off, and then you're going to be hot gluing or using some kind of adhesive from the hardware store to stick these things down, and that's just not fun. So we'll go ahead, and what I like to do, it's kind of like applying graphics or something like that. I'm just going to start at the end of my tape, and I'm going to get my first bit down. I want to get that first LED pretty close to the end. And then I'm going to start applying my strip really nice and gently. I know it's hard for you guys to see. Really apply it right in the center of the channel. And then, once I get that first couple inches down, I can start pulling with one hand on the adhesive backing and with the other hand applying it. If you have a friend, this goes faster. Make sure as you apply it that there aren't any bubbles in it, or any spots where the strip kind of lifts up for a second, because that looks bad in the end result. You really want to take your time here and do a good job. Even if you don't think anybody's going to see it, it just, over the long haul, you want to keep your project neat. It just helps it look better. I'm just moving down my strip here. Just applying it as I go along. Another thing about the N-Tech tape, or a higher quality brand, is that it's actually a lot easier to keep the strip straight because it's a more solid strip. It doesn't wiggle around as much. And actually, if you're not using regular connectors between your LED segments, if you just want to solder on some bare wire, that's okay too. And then I actually really like these Wago style lever nut connectors. I bought a big pack the other week. Actually, N-Tech's Pixel Octo came with some. And they're like a really high quality wire nut. They come in a variety of sizes like this. And they're more expensive, sure, than like a wire nut or something like that, but you're able to wire stuff together. And actually, while I'm noting this, another thing that I like to use to wire them together is not only these Wago connectors, but I go ahead and I buy this LED cable off of Amazon. It's just an 18 gauge cable that you can buy. It's a nice white cable. It's actually really high quality, easy to work with, and not very expensive either. So we'll finish applying this here. Perfect. So now we've got it all applied, and so the next thing we're going to do is hook it into our Pixel controller and make sure it works. If you haven't already, and I just flipped it back on, that's why you saw the lights flash, you're going to want to connect in your pixels to your controller. So I simply did that using this screwdriver and these terminal blocks here on the controller to wire in my pigtail, and I've got multiple things going on here, that's why it kind of looks like a mess, to wire in my new pigtail with the Wago connector into the output of my Pixel controller. Now I've got a test pattern running. Most decent Pixel controllers are going to come with a test pattern always running. So let me go ahead and hook my pixels in. I'm going to turn off my controller real quick. Then I'm going to hook in my new Pixel lightsaber, and now I'm going to turn it back on. And when it comes back up, we can see our pixels in action. It's that simple. So now you could go use these pixels in any arrangement you want on your stage. The next thing we're going to do, and the last thing, is get control of these guys. So depending on what you're doing, you're probably going to use either ArtNet or SACN to control these guys from a lighting console or a pixel mapping program. So let's dive into the computer, and I'm going to show you how to control these guys using NTEX Elm. While I hop over there, the very next thing you're going to do is count the number of LEDs that you have in each segment. This is going to be really important when you set it up in a pixel mapping program like Elm, knowing exactly how many LEDs you have total and how many are in each segment that you're creating. "92. So actually, one last quick tip here while I get onto the computer is that any project, when I've got an LED, strip LEDs like this, I'm just going to write on the back the total number, so that if I need to come back and get it later, I've got it right there. Now, using a program like NTEX Elm is usually pretty simple. And so what I like to do first is actually set up my LED controllers. So for this, I've just got one controller. So I'm going to open up NTEX NMU software. This is their node management utility. Depending on who you get your pixel driver from, they may have a program like this. Some they may not. Choose the right network interface if you have multiple. Press Discovery to find your devices. All right, so we're using our Pixel Octo here. We're going to press Configure. It's going to pop open a web browser. Then it's really just pretty simple here. So right now it's in preset mode. As you saw, we were running the little chase on them before during the video. So I'm just going to go ahead and go to Settings. And I'm going to make sure it's set properly. It's using DHCP, which is great. My output, I'm using output 2 for this example. And I'm actually only going to do 92 pixels. So I can do the full 680 or I can dumb it down to just 92. Doesn't really matter. And I can set my color order here. I recommend doing that usually inside of your pixel driver so that you don't have to think about it in your pixel mapping program, but you can usually do it either place. Then I'm just going to go here to direct, pop it into direct mode. My pixels then will turn off once I save it, and we'll be good to go. So I'm setting these up as SACN. I'm going to be using output 2 here. And so I just want to use the first 4 universes. If you're thinking about ArtNet and SACN and you're not sure which one to use, just use SACN. It's a lot easier. Awesome. So now we can see the LED strip is lit up, and but it's not chasing anymore. It's just keeping that last data that it had. So now let's hop over to Elm. We're going to create a new project. We'll do it 1080p. Doesn't really matter what we call it. And now I just want to add strips. This is really easy using a program like Elm. So I'm going to add one strip. It's wired simply, just straight side to side. It's got 92 pixels. They're RGB. They're in a line. I can also do loops and curves, which is great. And they're running SACN starting at 1. Press OK. And now we saw that my strips just turned off because now they're getting data from Elm. So I'm just going to move these guys to about the center of the field. And one of the things I like to do first whenever I'm working with an LED project like this is, line this up real good, is I like to just test it. So in Elm, you can do a quick test to make sure everything is lined up on your stage the way that it's supposed to. So I can pop this into testing mode, turn that on, and then first it's going through these colors. I can make sure that the colors on my screen match the colors on the LED strip. They do, because I already did this before. Then I can go ahead and I can do a vertical bar, and I can scroll that across here. And I could do a horizontal bar too. And using these 2 bars allows me to make sure everything's mapped right, especially if you're using a lot of different LED strips. You can make sure it all lines up just perfectly. Now, it's really as simple as going to live, using some of the pre-built content or bringing in your own stuff, and firing it off. And you've got LED pixels working with your lighting console on your stage. Awesome. So now you've built your first LED project. How's that feel? Awesome. If you do have more questions or you want more in-depth information or help building your first LED project, check out LearnStage Lighting Labs. Inside, you get videos just like this, but even more in-depth and even better, especially if you're embarking on a project like this. You can work out all your numbers, figure out what you're doing, and you can run that idea by me. And I'll look it over and I'll let you know some things that I'd recommend tweaking or some problems you might run into on the way so that you can have your most successful project. A lot of folks here have also probably heard about LearnStage Lighting Labs and that there's a variety of videos in there on all aspects of lighting. So if you're just getting started, you want to do great stuff like this, and you want to shortcut your way to doing a great job, I really recommend checking out the materials there, because you can get the knowledge that I have in building these projects and have it right for you on this online portal. So I hope you subscribe here on LearnStage Lighting, and I will see you guys in the next video. Thanks.